Hey everyone, Israel is currently in a war against the terror organization Hamas, and we know how hard it can be to keep up with all the news. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of the latest developments out of Israel, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. Israeli forces remain in control of the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing, but have not attempted to advance so far. The Rafah cross remains closed to humanitarian aid, but the Kerem Shalom crossing has reopened only days after 4 soldiers were killed by a Hamas rocket strike nearby. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
Defense Minister Gallant was with troops in a staging area for the Rafah operation and said Israel will continue the operation in the southern Gaza city until Hamas forces in the area are destroyed or hands over even one Israeli hostages it still holds. His meaning, the Rafah operation will continue moving forward unless there is a hostage for truce deal with Hamas.
הוריתי אתמול לצה"ל להיכנס אל מרחב רפיח, לתפוס את המעבר ולבצע את משימותיו. הפעולה הזאת תימשך עד אשר נחסל את חמאס במרחב רפיח ובמרחב הרצועה כולה, או עד אשר יחזור החטוף הראשון. אנחנו מוכנים לפשרות על מנת להביא חטופים. אבל אם לא תהיה את האפשרות הזאת, נלך ונעמיק את הפעולה. זה יקרה בכל רחבי הרצועה. בדרומה, במרכזה ובצפונה, אנחנו יודעים שחמאס מבין רק כוח.
IDF forces seized the main border crossing between Egypt and southern Gaza yesterday, shutting down a vital aid route into the Palestinian enclave. In the short term, Israel is trying to raise the pressure on Hamas to agree to the deal to free Israeli hostages held captive since October 7th. The army provided this update.
I want to give you an update on the situation in Rafah. Yesterday, the IDF called on Gazan residents and international organizations in eastern Rafah to temporarily evacuate and move a few miles away to the expanded humanitarian area in El Mawasi. There, we have coordinated an increase in field hospitals, tents, and quantities of food, water, and medicine. The quick movement of civilians away from areas that were under Hamas's control enabled us to advance. Last night, IDF ground troops began a precise, intelligence-based counterterrorism operation in limited areas in eastern Rafah, an operation against Hamas terrorists and infrastructure there. The troops are operating in a specific defined area where residents have already been evacuated.
With Rafah crossing closed, Israel today reopened the Kerem Shalom crossing only days after it was shuttered following a deadly Hamas rocket attack. The move was made after the White House said that Prime Minister Netanyahu had promised President Biden during a call Monday that he would reopen the Kerem Shalom crossing. 4 soldiers were killed and 10 wounded in the rocket strike from Gaza on an IDF staging ground adjacent to Kerem Shalom. Meanwhile, the U.S. is reportedly holding up several Boeing-made arms shipments to Israel for at least 2 weeks. This would be the first time since the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war that the U.S. has held up a weapons shipment for the IDF, which it's been supplying on a near-constant basis since October 7th. An unnamed official reportedly said that the Biden administration held up the shipment of 2,500-pound bombs that it feared Israel might use in its ground operation in the densely populated Rafah. Washington strongly opposes a major offensive in Rafah, arguing that it cannot be done while ensuring the safety of the over 1 million Palestinians sheltering there.
The country paused today to honor the memory of the Holocaust's 6 million victims while reflecting on the tragic parallels with the recent Hamas massacre. This poignant perspective was underscored at the state opening ceremony for Holocaust Remembrance Day at Yad Vashem, where Israeli leaders drew comparisons between the Holocaust and the Hamas attack. For more, ILTV's Mayan Huffman.
At 10 a.m. today, the nation paused to remember the Holocaust, honoring the 6 million Jews who were lost. This year, Israel reflects on Yom HaShoah with a poignant perspective, following the tragic October 7th Hamas massacre that claimed over 1,200 Israeli lives. The haunting echoes of children hiding in fear, acts of sexual violence, and widespread devastation of Jewish communities echo those darker days of history. During the official state opening ceremony for Holocaust Remembrance Day at Yad Vashem, officials drew parallels between the Holocaust and the recent Hamas attack. Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has referred to Hamas as, quote-unquote, the new Nazis, have frequently compared the two events since October 7th. However, Israeli leaders have stressed that one of the differences today is that there is a state of Israel. Netanyahu said that Hamas's attack against Israel on October 7th was not a Holocaust, not because of an absence of intention to annihilate us, but because of an absence of ability.
מרצחי החמאס מונחים על ידי אותה מטרה בדיוק. הם הורגים תינוקות, ילדים, נשים, גברים, צעירים, מבוגרים. הם חטפו את אחינו ואחיותינו ועדיין מחזיקים חצי מהם במרתפים החשוכים. אנו נחושים להוציא את כולם.
On Monday, the country's leaders once again participated in a joint event, the official wreath-laying ceremony at the foot of the torches lit the night before by dignitaries and representatives of survivor groups and institutions. This was followed by a memorial candlelighting ceremony in the Hall of Remembrance and the youth movement ceremony that included a conversation between Holocaust survivor Miriam Tropper and her granddaughter, Mor Tropper. Yad Vashem's chairman, Danny Dayan, spoke with ILTV before the day solemn events.
In some sense, we are in a race against the calendar. Many Holocaust survivors, tens of thousands of Holocaust survivors have given testimony to us, to other organizations in which we have agreements to share those testimonies. But definitely we have to raise and to gather testimonies to those that haven't. But, you know, Maya, that said, I never forget that 6 million Jews were never able to give testimony. They were never able to write their memories or to sit in front of a camera or a laptop and type or record their testimonies because they perished. They perished in the Shoah.
We continue to say the words never again, meaning that there will never be another Holocaust. But when Dayan was asked whether or not Jews could still believe in the concept of never again, this is what he said.
Never again is not, we are not declaring a fact. Actually, is a goal. And we should work hard in order to be sure that doesn't happen. When leaders from the world, dignitaries, come to Yad Vashem and declare never again, I am always haunted by the question, are they sincere? Or is just a shallow cliche, the right thing to say in the right place? And I developed a litmus test, and my litmus test is whether the country or the organization or the university that this person leads has an implementable, unimplemented plan to combat anti-Semitism. If he or she does, then they probably are sincere. If she or he does not have it, then they are most probably hypocritical. And it is important also to say what we mean by anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, of course, is the persecution of Jews, but by neo-Nazis, but also the calls for the elimination of the State of Israel, whether they come from Tehran, the mullahs in Tehran, or the professors in Columbia University. And all types of anti-Semitism should be confronted, defeated. Those that pick and choose only a specific kind of anti-Semitism to confront, again, they are not sincere when they say never again.
In yet another loud protest, more than 1,000 anti-Israel protesters swarmed through the streets of New York City, attempting to disrupt one of America's hottest fashion events, the Met Gala. Police managed to keep the protesters away, but not without arresting more than 24 people. This, of course, comes at the same time anti-Israel demonstrators gathered outside Auschwitz at the annual March of the Living yesterday to protest against Israel. More from ILTV editor-in-chief Mayan Hoffman.
Dozens of pro-Palestinian protesters were arrested Monday night near the Met Gala after more than 1,000 swarmed the area, attempting to disrupt what is considered celebrity fashion's biggest night out. According to local media reports, the protesters vandalized several historic memorials in Central Park and the surrounding area while marching through the streets shouting, "Stop the genocide, end the apartheid, and free Palestine." In at least one instance, a protester was seen burning the American flag. The words Gaza and Free Gaza were sprayed at the base of the 107th Infantry Memorial and on the bronze statue of Civil War General William Sherman. The pro-Palestinian Within Our Lifetime activist group organized the activists as part of a Day of Rage demonstration. The event began at Hunter College, about 1.2 miles from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the gala was held. In recent weeks, colleges across the United States have become hotspots for protests related to the Gaza war. These protests, particularly at Ivy League institutions, have escalated into violence, resulting in the arrest of thousands of individuals. In this case, police said 27 were arrested, but did not specify what charges were made. The NYPD put barricades near the Met Gala, widely anticipating that it would draw demonstrations. Some Gaza war demonstrators were captured on video trying to push through those barricades. However, the police were successful, and the protesters never made it to the gala.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple. ILTV's Rachel Safdie visited Tel Aviv University to speak to students who are in a dual degree program with Columbia University. She heard from them about the impact these protests are having on their lives. Let's take a look.
Did you know that Tel Aviv and Columbia University have a dual degree program? Well, I'm here today to speak to some of these students who are in their second year, finishing up their time here in Tel Aviv, and are supposedly going to Columbia, which has become the epicenter of the anti-Israel protests. So what was your reaction seeing that Columbia has become the epicenter of the anti-Israel protests?
So after October 7, like most people in Israel, I was very sad about the hostages and the ongoing situation, what's going on in the country. But there's also the side of me that's international, that grew up with a lot of these kids who not only go to Columbia, but also go to all these American universities and are pro-Palestine and supporting that movement. And nowadays, when all the information comes from TikTok and people don't actually know how to research and things like this, it's sad to not be able to speak with them and have them kind of turn on you and say, oh, but we can't find the sources on the Israel side, so we're not going to listen. We're just going to see one or two things here.
And what was your first reaction seeing that Columbia became the epicenter of the anti-Israel protests?
I was very upset. My family was also very upset. Unfortunately, it didn't really surprise me because we've been seeing this kind of simmering for a while. It also kind of came up in 2021 when there was a war at that time too. And overall, it's been very upsetting seeing it.
And has your decision to attend Columbia changed?
Yeah, so I decided to drop out. It had multiple factors, but I don't think I would have considered dropping or switching programs had October 7th not happened, because the way that Columbia, the whole social atmosphere changed was really disheartening, and it made me not really want to go there anymore.
So you will be attending Columbia next semester. How are you feeling regarding that?
So I think the biggest W for people who hate Jews, who hate the state of Israel, would be for us to not attend university. And I believe it's also the biggest victory for us if we do attend. And I don't mean that in any way violently, the opposite. I mean, it's beautiful if we attend. We're also able to bridge and have conversation with people who are different and present the Israeli that they don't see on the news. So that's for that.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With anti-Semitism rising in America and pressure growing on President Biden over the war in Gaza, one of Israel's staunchest voices against extremism on both sides has been Democratic Congressman Richie Torres, who joins us now on the broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd just like to start by hearing your take on the recent arrests on college campuses. It seems to be very clear that these protests aren't really about supporting Palestinians, rather about calling for violence against Israelis. Is there a better way? And what does being pro-Palestinian actually look like?
There's a crisis of anti-Semitism in America, and higher education is ground zero. I worry that we have college campuses that are indoctrinating the next generation of Americans with a hatred for Israel that's so visceral and fanatical that it renders them indifferent to the value of Jewish life. And as you said, there's nothing remotely pro-peace or anti-war or pro-Palestinian about the encampment movement. There's a deepening rot of anti-Semitism in the encampment movement. Two organizations, social justice, Palestinians, social justice in Palestine, and within our lifetime, these two organizations openly celebrate October 7th, openly glorify the terrorism of Hamas as quote-unquote resistance. And so if you are openly glorifying Hamas and terrorism, you're not pro-peace and anti-war, you're anti-peace and pro-war. And that is exactly what's happening. And you might have seen in Columbia University, there was a student organizer who said that Zionists do not deserve to live. And he said that Zionists should be grateful to him for not going out there and murdering. So these are the kinds of people who are leading the encampment movement in places like Columbia University, and it's deeply troubling. And of course, the Islamic leader of Iran has enthusiastically endorsed the anti-Israel encampment movement, which tells you everything you need to know.
Absolutely. Now, since October 7th, President Biden has remained steadfast in support for Israel, as have many Democrats like yourself. But despite that, both you and President Biden have faced some harassment over this. Why is it important to you and to many Democrats to take this stand in support of Israel and against these anti-peace movements that have sort of taken over the Palestinian cause?
Look, I feel like we all have an obligation to fight hate and extremism, no matter what form it takes, no matter what direction from which it comes. People are often shocked that a Black, gay, Latino, millennial congressman from the Bronx cares deeply about fighting anti-Semitism. But I reject the notion that one must be Jewish to combat anti-Semitism, just like I would reject the notion that one must be Black to combat anti-Black racism. Throughout history, there have been Jews who gave their lives for the cause of civil rights. 60 years ago, Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, as well as James Chaney, were barbarically murdered in the Mississippi burning so that Black Americans could have the right to vote and live freely, liberated from the cruelty of Jim Crow. And so, for me, we're all in this together. We all have an obligation to fight hate. And I worry that the far left could be to the Democratic Party in American politics what Jeremy Corbyn became to the Labour Party in British politics. And the burden falls on pro-Israel Democrats like myself to resist, actively resist, the Jeremy Corbynization of progressive politics.
Now, you've been targeted personally for your support for Israel, even receiving comments, some of which you shared, in which anti-Israel activists have used the N-word and made other appallingly racist and hateful comments. What is your response to this sort of extremism that we're seeing?
Look, there's no issue on which I have had to face more hate, harassment, and death threats than on the subject of Israel. I've even been the target of racist invective from Mohammed Hadid, who is the father of Bella and Gigi Hadid. His comments are so offensive that it's almost not even worth repeating them. But he made blatantly racist comments about me simply because I'm pro-Israel. And it seems like if you're a person of color and pro-Israel, then you become fair game for racism. So there's a double standard within American society.
Now, switching gears just a little bit, I mean, a lot of the activities, the actions, the chaos we're seeing in the Middle East is fueled and funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran, which you referenced earlier. What is U.S. Congress doing to push back against what is, dubbed the head of the snake?
There's a false narrative among the far lefts that Israel is the root of all evil in the Middle East. And my response is there is a root of all evil, but it's not Israel. It's Iran. Israel is a stabilizing force in the Middle East, whereas Iran is the destabilizing force. Like Iran is intent on destabilizing the state system in the Middle East in order to achieve its own ambitions for regional hegemony. You know, wherever you have a failed state, whether it's Lebanon or Syria or Yemen or to a lesser extent Iraq, you have the tentacles of Iran. And Iran has been waging war on Israel, on the world's only Jewish state, through a network of proxies. And after October 7th, you know, we all should have had an awakening about the true nature of the Iranian threat. There is no reforming the present regime in Iran. It is rotten to the core, and it is the root of instability in the Middle East. And we in the United States have to fundamentally rethink our approach to Iran.
Now, when it comes to social media, we've really seen some shocking anti-Semitism, support for terrorism on social media. You have been one of the supporters of the bill proposed in U.S. Congress, passed in U.S. Congress, to require TikTok or ByteDance to sell to a non-adversarial country. Well, in simple terms, of course, to not be controlled by the government of China. What is the role of social media in the conflict we're seeing today between Israel and Hamas? And how much impact does this disinformation, especially state-sponsored disinformation, impact public opinion?
Well, there's nothing unprecedented about anti-Semitism. What's unprecedented is the algorithmic amplification of anti-Semitism on social media. Social media platforms like TikTok and Twitter enable anti-Semitism to spread at a pace and on a scale and to an extent that we have never seen before. And nowhere has anti-Semitism been more amplified than on TikTok. We in the United States have real concerns about the national security risk of TikTok. We passed legislation that is not a ban on TikTok, it's a forced sale of TikTok. And the purpose of the legislation is not to target speech, as is commonly misunderstood. The purpose is to target hostile foreign ownership. ByteDance, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is subject to the control of the Chinese Communist Party. ByteDance collects vast quantities of information about 170 million American users and is required by Chinese law to report that information to the Chinese government upon request. And for us, TikTok is not merely a social media platform, it's the leading news source for the next generation of Americans. And the fact that we have put our leading news source, the most impressionable American minds, in the hands of our leading foreign adversary is an act of national self-sabotage.
Absolutely. Well, Congressman Torres, we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for your principled leadership and, of course, for taking the time to speak with us today.
Absolutely. Take care.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. Stay safe and see you next week.